Politics Outsiders.
Good morning and welcome to Outsiders, the show that is to woke politics on steroids, anti-Semitism gone mad, left-wing depravity and smug sanctimony. What the new UK Under-Secretary to Justice is to smashing the gangs.
Smash the gangs and try and get...
How many gangs have you smashed?
Well, we've stopped tens of thousands
But how many
of
gangs have
attempted
you
crossings.
smashed?
Arrests of members of these gangs have gone up, and we've seen...
Well, how many have been arrested then? Let's do that.
Well, Nick, let's deal with the end result of the problem.
Minister,
Nick.
you just said you are smashing the gangs. How many people have been arrested?
Well, there've been a number of arrests, but I'll tell you the proof is in the pudding.
What's the number? 10?
Nick,
20?
hold on.
1,000?
I don't have that number for you, but I have another number for you.
Well, you're not smashing the gangs.
But Nick, I have a number more...
Yes, that pathetic character is the new British Labor Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State for the Ministry of Justice, Jake Richards. But it gets worse.
This July is the lowest number of boat crossings for 6 years. We've seen around a 40% reduction in boat crossings this year compared to last year.
Since Mr Burnham moved into number 10.
And we've got a lot more to do. But there is no doubt at all, as the Prime Minister has said on this issue, that we are heading in the right direction. We are continuing to work at pace.
How can you
to
be
make
heading
sure
in the right 170 people nearly burnt to death on the Channel. How's that heading in the right direction?
I don't know, guys. Rowan, Rita, I'm not exactly sure our friend young Jake here is exactly on top of his brief.
Because fewer people are attempting to cross the Channel, because we are taking action both here at home with huge reforms of the asylum system.
How many traffickers have been arrested?
Well, I don't have that figure for you.
Why
but
not?
If you look at the Home Office...
You're the one who said you're smashing the gangs, not me.
Brilliant work there from Nick Ferrari at LBC. And while we wait for the Under-Secretary to find his briefing notes, let's grab the latest Outsiders news. Well, Rita and James, lots going on. We've got this ridiculous nonsense of a school march against Pauline Hanson and One Nation. So I always thought, Rita and James, that you kept politics out of the classroom. That's certainly how I was brought up, but that's a long time ago, isn't it?
I'm not sure you would have been, because the left's long march through the institution started with education, and it's still where they are most active, whether you're talking about primary school, high school, right through to higher education. And we've seen this before with the climate march, with pro-immigration marches, the BLM movement, remember that? You had kids involved in that. So I'm not shocked, but we need the parents to assert some influence here. These are your children that are being used as useful idiots by the political left, by the ideological zealots of the left. And the parents need to take action. You cannot let the schools and the culture raise your children and then become shocked. I say this so many times, particularly with Conservative parents, who are shocked that they've raised some septum ring-wearing, green-haired loser who thinks the world's ending in 5 years and Australia's the worst country on earth and we're built on white supremacy, all these bizarre, toxic worldviews. And it's like, well, did you ever discuss this with them as they were growing up, or did you just outsource this to the schools and shocked by the product?
But the point you make there, sorry, James, just jump in there. The point is that, and I agree it's a fine line, but all those things were causes, supposedly. Yes, they were left-wing causes. But this is, to the best of my knowledge, the first time there's a march specifically against a political party and a politician rather than a cause. Am I splitting hairs?
You are not splitting hairs, Rowan. In fact, you're exactly right. And this is the trend. And, you know, I've been saying, you can see the flyer there on your screen there. It is Say No to Hanson. Students say no to Hanson right there. So it's not just about, you know, an idea like, oh, it's getting too hot and all of that sort of stuff. It's actually targeting a specific person, which again makes it more sinister because, of course, you know, the left is always about, oh, don't dehumanize people. Don't dehumanize migrants. Don't dehumanize this. Don't dehumanize that. But we can dehumanize Pauline Hanson. And this is the continuation, and this is the reason why shows like this are important, frankly, because, you know, we point out the trends. I have been saying on this program for years that this is an increasingly Maoist tendency in society. It is Maoist because what you are doing is you are getting the children to do the whole Cultural Revolution routine where you get them out of the classroom, you get them onto the streets. The kids think this is great fun, by the way. The kids think this is fantastic. They get a day out of school and they get to feel like they're part of a cause and all of that sort of thing, which, you know, kids, if they're not given any other political grounding and educational grounding, the schools don't do it. Rita's right, the parents have to do it, into why this is absolutely nonsense and a bad idea. They go along with it. And I'm sorry, Rita, though, one of the problems, though, is, okay, you've got your conservative parents, you know, maybe let's say that's 30% of the country, but most other parents, you know, even if they're apolitical, the problem is most people go along with stupid things if they're told that's what it means to be a nice person or a good person.
So I don't disagree with that. I think even people who are apathetic, apolitical, not that engaged in these sorts of political issues, still have beliefs, still have thoughts on major issues of the day, even if it doesn't cause them to, you know, go to a protest or talk about it on their Facebook page. And you need to have those discussions with your children, especially if you're seeing your children becoming radicalised in schools, because a lot of these radicalised kids are also depressed. So it's a really unhealthy mindset. And the left have done this for a long time. I think it is just the same pattern. I know this time it's focused on Pauline Hanson, but it was the same way with Greta Thunberg. They used her because you then can't attack what they're saying because they're children. So you can't say, well, this entire idea, this speech is absolutely idiotic, because then you're attacking a child. You're calling a child an idiot. And that's exactly what they're doing with this Pauline Hanson protest.
Let's have a listen, Rita, because on that point, there's numerous of these clips around, but have a listen to this one kid talking about this protest this week.
If you're a high schooler planning to walk out on the 13th of August, then send us a video with you and anyone else so we can build a movement against the right-wing fascist politics of Pauline Hanson.
Now listen to the next one.
Because when you're on the side of the fascists and the oligarchs and the billionaires like Gina Reinhardt, you know you're on the wrong side of history.
So listen very carefully to that. Notice how it all joins up. You've got the ABC demonising Gina Reinhardt. We'll get onto that a bit later in the show. You've got these school kids linking Pauline Hanson, oligarchs, fascism. I would have thought that's defamatory. Maybe Pauline Hanson should look at that kid and say, OK, we'll see you in court. Linking that to billionaires, linking it to Gina Reinhardt. So you've got this insidious, as James says, Maoist. I'd go further, say it's Pol Pot. It's the same thing, using the education system to turn kids against their parents and their parents' values. It's really dangerous. It's really sinister. Rita called it correct. It's radicalisation of our youth, and it is happening through the ABC, it's happening through the schools, and it's happening through the universities, and it's an utter disgrace that there is a march against a political figure organised by the education system. Well, the unions, probably.
The crazy thing about this, too, I mean, that second clip is fascinating to me, and also attributed, by the way, one of the organizers behind this sort of stuff has, you know, a lot of ties to saying some pretty unpleasant things about the October 7th attacks as well, apparently.
Oh, I'm shocked.
But you know, shocked. I know you're completely shocked, Rita.
Wow.
But the interesting thing about that last clip there is so fascinating to me because that is a direct importation of American Democrat socialist rhetoric, you know, the oligarchs, you know, the billionaires. It's entirely imported from the United States, and it creates a permission structure, and it's creating a permission structure for ever more mayhem.
Yes. All of it's imported. All of it is imported. It all starts in America, and these idiots just regurgitate what they've heard there, the same little catchphrases, the same word salads. If you actually ask them to unpack any of that, if you even ask them the most simple question of what is a fascist, you love saying that word, what is a fascist, you will see them absolutely unravel because they can't define it in any way that actually condemns their political opponents.
But
in fact,
and it doesn't condemn themselves and their process.
That's it. It is. It's so much projection with this movement. It really, every accusation is a confession with this lot. And they've been doing it for a long time. Yes, Pauline Hanson is the target now, but this movement is not new, not here and certainly not in the US.
But what do parents do? What can parents and grandparents do?
Parents can have a backbone. You can assert your influence on your own child. If you can't even do that, if you can't even run a household where you talk about your values, where you challenge some of these crazy ideas.
Yeah, but it's got to go further than that. It's got to go to the school, because it's not the kid's fault what the school's doing. He wants to be cool with his mates.
Yeah, but not every kid's on board with this.
No, I know.
And the kids who are not, maybe they're not interested in politics at all. Maybe they've got parents who've taken the time to talk about these issues.
Absolutely, but what a point do the kids start saying we're not going to attend school that day, or the parents going to the teachers and saying this has got to stop, we've had enough of this garbage, we will not tolerate it. When's that going to happen?
Well, the problem is, you know, they also have to go to the schools. Now, almost every jurisdiction, except for Queensland, is really, you know, run by Labor, so you're not going to get the education ministers, but parents need to take it to, and the opposition needs to make a big point of this too.
Oh,
you know,
hello.
This was the who. I know the opposition.
The Liberal Party.
Yeah. But
they'll probably be
remember,
marching against Pauline Hanson with the kids.
This happened during, you know, the October 7th thing. There were all the Palestine Action Group teachers who were doing the exact same thing, encouraging their kids to wear keffiyehs to school, to march out of class, all of this stuff. It is using the kids. You know, it is absolutely the responsibility of parents, but it is the responsibility of a responsible government, and I don't care what stripe of government they are, to say, no, we do not, you know, use the schools to ram through these crazy political agendas. And, you know, if Labor had any brains about this sort of stuff, they would be furious about this, because mainstream Labor is far to the right of the people who are organizing these protests. So, you know, they might think, oh, yeah, it's going after Hanson.
That's wishful
thinking. It will
thinking.
come for them as well.
No, they think it's working for them, so they will never live to...
But it's foolish, is what I'm saying.
You saw the ideas that were being discussed and proposed at Labor's National Conference. No, this is Labor now. This is modern Labor. Yeah, Labor in the good old days had a far more sensible... area of you know, you had the Labor right faction, which was a lot more in line with I think how a lot of us see Labor, but modern Labor is entirely different. You've got a socialist left Prime Minister, and he's setting the tone.
Exactly. That's a very good argument for getting rid of education from the federal government and handing it to the states, get some competition back. At the moment, the states are a mess, but in the long run, you need to get competition into the Australian education system to make the unions less powerful and to give parents more control. Parents should be phoning around each other this week and saying to their friends, their mates, whatever, we've got to stop this within our schools. They've got to start working at it.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
They should actually, well, maybe here's a policy for the coalition or One Nation: ban teachers' unions.
Yes.
Because a teachers' union is for the teachers. It is not for their customers, the parents and the kids. It is a group that actively works against education. I was down in Melbourne the other day, and, you know, I walked into this thousands of people from the education union. They were just walked out of school because, you know, they were all angry about something like that. They had their red shirts on, their commie red shirts on. They had their signs and everything. I know Melbourne is a constant state of protest at the moment. It's like being in, you know, Castro's Cuba or something like that. But it is... you know, the education union, the teachers union. And then the other thing, you know, they should do is they say, we will go and we will just buy the curriculum off the shelf from Singapore or someplace like that, particularly in maths.
Singapore's pretty good.
And just, you know, teach that, because obviously our own education people cannot cut it, and get rid of that Federal Department of Education. I think it employs, you know, thousands of people, and it does absolutely nothing.
Someone else we should be getting rid of is the E-Safety Commissioner. Disturbing story from the Weekend Australian. I urge people to read it. It's very legal, it's very detailed, so we'll just keep it broad strokes for the sake of it. But we're talking about our E-Safety Commissioner. This is this Julie Inman Grant. Yet again, she's threatening a $910,000, so nearly $1 million fine to Elon Musk and Twitter. And wait for it, I'll just read it out to you. Australia's E-Safety Commissioner has threatened social media giant X with a $910,000 fine if it does not immediately remove a shared article by a US-based feminist that raised concerns about an Australian Medical Association Victoria staff member who has regularly generated and posted extreme transgender pornography in public online forums. Read the article, but it basically goes to here's the E-Safety Commissioner basically trying to attempt to stop someone exposing the activities of someone who is on the Australian public purse that the person exposing those activities thinks is detrimental.
Well, it's
and
not
the
the
Safety
first...
Commissioner is wading in, protecting, in my opinion, got the wrong end of the stick yet again, Julian Mann-Grant. She's already lost 2 court cases, I think maybe more, against on this very same issue. Or
yes,
issues.
This is again another cause she's picked up. Of all the things that are posted online, this is the one she's decided to waste our money. And every time she does something like this, not only is it deeply sinister and political, but it is costly because taxpayers foot the bill with these fights with Elon Musk's ex. We keep losing because Julian Mann-Grant is on the wrong side of history. She's a political activist who should not be the Safety Commissioner. And these losses are funded by the taxpayer. This is just absolutely appalling conduct. And we have seen, we've talked to Jasmine Sussex, I know you have, Rowan, I have. Again, she has been targeted similarly. Yes. She had a tweet taken down which essentially said men can't breastfeed. I mean, of all the disgusting filth that is online on multiple social media platforms, the fact that you would choose to target something like that tells you everything you need to know with this office, which was created to protect children from online predators. It has completely morphed into something else. Totally. The Liberal Party stuffed up royally with this appointment, and they need to back away because they are still weak on this issue. Totally. Every time there's some political activism from this office, the Libs don't know how to deal with it, James.
They don't do anything about it. They stay completely hands-off because they're afraid to touch the issue. You know, they're just too timid to touch it because, well, for their own reasons. I mean, they don't have a spine on a lot of things at the moment. This is, of course, their own creation. So they know that if they start attacking her, you know, Labour will say, oh, but you created it. But you created it. Now you're attacking it. And, of course, you know, quite clearly what's happened here, you know, Julian Mann-Grant, American, comes in, is plunked into this role here, expensive 6-figure role here, and she has, again, to bring up this whole idea of, I know, you know, I'm American too, so don't shoot me on this one, but, you know, brought these sort of, you know, American white liberal female obsessions around politics, the transgender issue, you know, all of these things into her role here. It is not, I don't think, when you look at the trend that she has taken out on, you know, these sorts of cases, Celine, other people we've had on this show. We've seen this over and over again. It is a trend, and it's a huge problem.
Is there a question about the accuracy of what was she's demanding be removed, or there'll be $1 million fine? There's nothing about the accuracy. It's not saying this is defamatory, this is threatening, this is... Because guess what? There's laws against that. So if something's defamatory, the person concerned could take action. If something is inciting violence, there's laws against that. It is not that. It is just making the public aware. As you said, I thought the key line was there. This individual has regularly generated and posted extreme transgender pornography in public online forums. Public online forums. You can't then pretend this is some sort of a breach to
exactly.
highlight this.
The point here is that...
Can I just explain, because viewers might find it a little bit vague. It is difficult because it's so legal. But basically what the E-Safety Commissioner is preventing an American article being read in this country online. That American article seeks to expose the fact, well, I'll give you the headline of the article and then you can decide for yourself. The headline of the article is Trans-Identified Male Hired by Australian Medical Association is sharing self-made BDSM, that's bondage, something, sadomasochism, porn, on social media. So that's what it's about. Someone working for the taxpayer is putting this pornographic stuff online on public forums. Someone has exposed this and said, I don't think it's...
Australian Medical Association. Yes, it's not the tax, but it is a very influential
she's going to stop us hearing this information. That's all. So what Julian Mann-Grant is trying to do is to suppress public information.
Which
How
is relevant.
That doing her job?
Which is relevant because we are seeing the AMA, we're seeing all sorts of things coming out of the medical profession, the bodies that represent the medical profession, that are causing enormous concern. Enormous concern. We've talked recently to a psychiatrist who had, 2-3 years of her career under a cloud because of this sort of activism in the medical profession. So it is highly relevant to Australia. And they want to stop Australians from learning about it.
Well, but they do, but they use this sort of language, and the language of the article is all about, may cause public disquiet or something along those sorts of lines, or open this person up to ridicule or abuse or something like that online. Well, if you don't want ridicule and abuse online, don't go online. That's my first point here. But, there's a broader point here where, again, it is this tendency, it feels, I said Maoist about the last story, but it does also feel Maoist here about this. It feels very much like, because remember, the e-safety commissioner here, she has a history of trying to ban things that might go to have people think, shall we say, wrong thoughts or commit wrong thinking. You remember when there was a Maronite bishop who was stabbed in Western Sydney, her office sought to immediately quelch that story because they didn't want there to be any sort of suggestion that possibly there may be tensions between Maronite Christians and possibly another faith in that part of town.
And yet the e-safety commissioner did nothing when the ABC kept online for 25 days the Gina Rinehart sodomy, murder, incitement to murder, etc. Nothing to see here, says the safety commissioner, but she's worried about some guy or some individual working for the whatever authority.
Because that might possibly incite mockery or what did you think that video by the ABC did? I mean, come on.
Exactly.
It is, but we've said this, it's been clear, crystal clear, beyond any doubt, that this office is not fit for purpose. It needs to be eliminated or completely restarted with a real purpose of protecting children from online sexual predators and other harms. Absolutely. Instead of trying to censor Australians and censor what Australians can see.
Well, but this is the thing, Rita. This is the Australian problem. We do this thing where, you have a problem. You have the internet and, there will be people on there doing disgusting, really unsavory, awful things to or about children. We have laws for that. We have an AFP that already exists to do that. They do very fine work fighting child exploitation. They bust rings. They work with other countries to bust these disgusting, awful, groups that do these terrible things. We don't actually need another agency to sit on the top. It's duplication. It's this duplication. So, why do we have, we've got the AFP, but it makes a lot of headlines. So why do we, announce another agency so it looks like we're doing something? And then that agency, because the AFP is already doing all of the work that's supposed to be done about busting these perverts, it is instead goes and winds up with this sort of thing, or, censoring news stories that they don't like or footage they don't like because it's always in the one direction, and it's always about this sort of vague sort of community cohesion sort of thing. We don't want anybody thinking anything bad about a minority group or this or that or the other thing. And it's projection, and it's duplication, and it's expensive, and it is anti-freedom, and it is anti-liberty.
I can tell you the disgusting threats, sexist, racist, just disgusting threats of violence, death threats that are made against conservative women, including me. Not one of them's been removed. I've never seen Julie Inman Grant sparked into action going, this is something that should not be on social media or online and order it to be removed. I've never seen that happen when just the most disgusting racial and threatening language is used against someone like Jacinta Price. But when it's something like this, when it is some hard left activist in a position of influence being exposed, whoa, that's when she's interested. That's when she's threatening $910,000 fines against X to bully an organisation to remove it. And thank God Elon Musk bought X and actually cares about free speech. That's why he bought it. It wasn't a business decision. He knew he wasn't going to be making money out of what he paid for it, because most social media they would just remove it. They don't want to fine, they don't want to fight, they don't want to pay lawyers to fight government authorities. So they would just remove it. So we are just uniquely blessed right now to have someone who is taking a stand against this. Otherwise, we wouldn't even hear about it. It would just be taken down and there would be no discussion.
And we are incredibly lucky that Elon Musk, an American billionaire, is fighting for the rights and freedoms of Australians, that he cares. I mean, we are so lucky because this particular Maoist e-safety commissioner seems to have an obsession, in my opinion, with this particular issue, and I'm not sure that's great either. Renters and housing, the Labor government... Basically, everything they have done economically, Jim Chalmers, you have completely stuffed up the one of the key cornerstones of the Australian economy. You've stuffed up the others with Chris Bowen, basically energy, manufacturing, those sorts of things. All the indicators now are that what they have done to the housing market is just an absolute farce.
And it is worse than that. You know, this government is so hostile to aspiration, to achievement, to wealth creation among the middle class, who, of course, in good communist fashion, they probably see as kulaks and hoarders, you know, who are being, you know, being very mean by, you know, wanting to, you know, have a little investment property on the side that's going to pay for their retirement or that sort of thing. Not only have they smashed the national wealth that is in property, but they have also ensured that we aren't doing anything to recreate and build other wealth somewhere else in the economy. So it just shrunk the economy. Perversely, the renters, the young people and everybody else who, you know, rents, the third of the country that rents, they're getting smashed because, of course, they're driving investment out of the market. So great, well done on that. But the craziest thing to me here is these labor clowns, and there's no other word for it. Well, they're bad clowns, or the clowns you should be scared of, are out there crowing about this. Yes. So you've got Tanya Plibersek saying, oh, well, there's never been a better time to, you know, buy a house. You've got the member for Bennelong, a particularly lovely character called Jerome Laxale. Has been putting all these memes online because, of course, that's how they communicate now in memes. They can't actually form full sentences anymore about how good it is that, you know, house prices have dropped. Well, a lot of people own homes in Bennelong. It's a very aspirational suburb. It has a large Chinese population as well, and, you know, they very much like to buy and invest in property. I wonder how they're feeling about this. Obviously, the coalition is, you know, nowhere on this, but, you know, that said, they are actively cheering as Australia and Australians get poorer. It's
the
insane.
Majority of Australians, their home is their biggest asset.
Yep.
So when the housing market goes backwards, it is bad for the majority of Australians. If you've got a mortgage, then it's disastrous. And we've got thousands of Australians who have bought homes recently using the Albanese government's 5% deposit scheme, encouraged to do so by the Albanese government. A lot of those people are now in negative equity. They owe the bank more than the house is worth. Now, you've got Labor ministers who don't even know what negative equity means. We had one on this station who thought it was the same as being behind on your home loan repayments. No, you silly goose. It means your house is worth less than what the bank you owe the bank.
We're going to take a short break, but at the same time, rents are going up and up for people who are renting. You can blame your rent increases on the Labor government, on Jim Chalmers. They did it deliberately. Great work there for Labor. Again, after the break, Rita's reality check in a tick.
Welcome back. You're watching Outsiders with your host, the brave and stunning Rowan Dean, the cis male heteronormative James Morrow, and I'm Rita Panahi, and soon we'll be speaking to Senator Alex Antic. But first, let me say words seldom heard on this program. Let's have a look at what's happening in the WNBA. This is not so much a sporting league, but a political movement, a hard-left anti-reality movement that will attack its own most marketable players for the crime of being right. Sophie Cunningham ignited a bizarre reaction from her WNBA colleagues. She ignited protests outside games, unhinged attacks from the media by simply stating the following. She said, "I think that I'm here to extend love, but I also think that with that love is truth, being honest. And I want to protect young girls in a locker room or young girls in sport who shouldn't have to go against biological men. Hard to think how such a common sense position could be stated any more sensitively, any more compassionately, but no. The immediate reaction from the lunatic left was hate. Sophie Cunningham was called everything from transphobic to a white supremacist. She has been booed relentlessly, attacked by coaches and players, but she did not back down.
I mean, I think I said what I said. I think it's kind of common sense. And I think I'll always believe in that. I think it's really important to protect children, and that's little girls who are also involved in that category.
And little girls do need to be protected, even when they're in the crowd watching the WNBA, supporting Sophie Cunningham. Watch what happened to these two girls who turned up to support Sophie, and they were wearing XXXY T-shirts in support of women's sport, protecting women's sport. These teenage girls were approached by the co-owner of the Seattle Storm, Celeste Keaton, and called effing insane and called trash, verbally abused by the crowd, including grown men. Have a look. Take the trash out, he says. Take yourself out, sir. Imagine what sort of imbecile would attack a teenage girl. And the fact that the crowd joined in the abuse instead of defending the girls tells you everything you need to know about the WNBA at the moment. Instead of standing up for women, including Sophie Cunningham, they are saying diabolically dumb stuff like this. Here is head coach of Sophie's own team, the Indiana Fever. Listen to Stephanie White.
What is your stance on men or athletes who test as biological male participating in women's sports? What's your personal stance?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I would say that I'm educated enough from a scientific standpoint. I don't ever believe that exclusion is an answer.
Amazing. She works in professional sport, and yet she can't speak with authority on the fact that men are bigger, faster and stronger. Why does she think the WNBA even exists? Does she know what the W stands for? Don't think Golden State head coach Natalie Nakasi knows. Listen to this intellectually vacuous virtue signalling.
With, like, for me, sports is about belonging. It's about inclusivity. It's about allowing everyone to be their authentic self. You know, I'm big on that just because I have been criticized for my height, for my ethnicity. So I'm all about women, little girls deserving to play, and that includes trans women. So I'm all about inclusivity.
Elite sport isn't about belonging or being inclusive. It's about the best of the best. It's about competition, and women simply cannot compete with men. The truth is, an under-14 boys side would beat the best female team in basketball. But the silly fools of the WNBA want to pretend that feelings trump facts. Here is WNBA player Gabby Williams saying she'd welcome trans women, aka men, into the league.
I think it's trans rights right now is our new battle. That's what I think I was saying, that like the battles have changed. Oh, yes. You know, like our intention's been the same, but now the environment has changed. We see trans people's rights being, you know, stripped away from them. There's a lot of discourse around trans athletes and where they can compete in. I would welcome a trans athlete on my team or against my team anytime.
Be careful what you wish for, Gabby, because this just happened.
After careful consideration and reviewing the current eligibility guidelines, I am officially declaring myself a WNBA prospect. If simply declaring who you are is all that's required, then I meet every single requirement necessary to compete in the WNBA.
That's former WNBA. That's former NBA first-round pick Enes Kanter-Freedom nominating for the WNBA. And here's another first-round pick putting up his manicured hand.
Oh, earlier this week, I made the announcement. I'm transgender. I'm a woman. I identify as sometimes identifying as a woman. for purposes of basketball, professional basketball. So I'll be declaring for the WNBA draft in 2027 as well. Well, I mean, I think I'd be unstoppable.
Stunning and brave right there. And if you're not on board with that, you're a filthy bigot. Have a look at yourself. Well done, WNBA. You wanted to be a hard left ideological movement instead of a sporting league. Well, you got your wish. Suddenly now, the WNBA bosses are worried about being mugged by reality. WNBA Commissioner Kathy Engelbart sent a letter to teams yesterday addressing concerns over the inclusion of transgender athletes after those former NBA players announced their intentions to declare for the WNBA draft. She wrote, "We recognise that this is a complex and nuanced topic, and we will continue to have important conversations with all of you and the Players Association in the weeks and months ahead. But it's not complex. It's not nuance. It's a matter of objective fact and biological reality. Men and women are different, and pretending otherwise only disadvantages female athletes."
Great stuff, Rita. And I'm pleased to say we have Senator Alex Antic here to chat with us about what's been going on. Alex, always great to see you. Thanks for coming on this morning. We were talking earlier about this schools marching now against, literally, teachers getting kids to march against political parties and political figures. What do you make of that, Senator?
Oh, well, Rowan, I mean, it just feels like Groundhog Day, doesn't it? It feels like only just 10 seconds ago we were talking about the school strike for climate, or the school, whatever it was called, and the same themes emerge, I think. I mean, you know, why are kids protesting things that they don't really, I think, have a proper grasp over, and why are they being encouraged to do it by adults? Kids need to be in schools. I think that's a very easy starting point, but also the worrying trend of children being politicised for matters that I think clearly are outside the remit of school-time education. Kids are allowed to have a view on all sorts of things, but quite why it is that they're taking time out of their learning, which is what they're there to do, to go and hit the streets. And, you know, how often does this happen, for something like, immigration, or COVID-19, or, freedom protests or whatever? It always seems to be flowing one way. It's a very worrying trend for the state of the political minds of our kids, I think.
James.
Hey, Alex, you mentioned migration just a moment ago, and I wanted to get your take on this controversy that's been brewing in Labour. We had Tony Burke. He was going to come out and supposedly make some deep cuts to migration, and then apparently he seems to have gotten rolled by the left of cabinet. So Labour seems all at sea on this. We've heard that maybe they're not going to cut migration. But on the other hand, Pauline Hanson has got a very strong position, $130,000 a year, cut down to, get out of the refugee conventions, deport those people who are here illegally, all of this sort of stuff. How does the coalition square the circle now between, the migration policies of Pauline Hanson and Labour? Because, I think a lot of people would agree that things like the refugee convention are out of date and up for abuse.
Yeah, well, I mean, James, there's I think a bigger discussion there about Australia's position being tethered to supranational globalist organisations like the United Nations, the World Health Organization and others, but we'll park that for a moment. So, I think that's the first point. The second one, I think, is that, this does highlight, as we know, and they do hide it better than most, but it does highlight how the Labor Party and the left of the Labor Party are indelibly welded to this concept of migration. And, even when you think there are signs of life there and signs of hope coming out of the Labor caucus, there's this almighty fight, presumably in a Chinese restaurant at somewhere in inner city Sydney or Melbourne, and all of a sudden you get the same old thing rewashed and sent out the other side of the room. So it's not surprising. We've seen it before, but the Labor Party are addicted to the Ponzi scheme of immigration, and they're taking a lot of water on for what's happening to the property market and what's going to happen to renters as a result of their tax changes. And look, I just think they're addicted to this policy, and the coalition's position has to be as clear as we've made it, which is to reduce the numbers, and to do it quickly, because Australia just cannot sustain these numbers.
Rita. How much of the determination to maintain those high numbers from Labor is around economic activity, and how much of it is around what we've heard from a Labor pollster, that you've got certain migrant groups overwhelmingly voting Labor? So they're essentially shoring up their own prospects in future elections by eventually having these new arrivals naturalised and participating in the electoral process.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a good question, Rita. It's hard to get into the mindset of a Labor MP. We've all tried. It doesn't seem to be fathomable. So it's hard to know. I mean, I think the starting point is, though, that it is true to say that because of, and this is not just a recent phenomenon, because of generations of the political class squibbing on the bigger issue, which are providing the ability for Australian families, people who already live here, to grow their families, to be able to have the possibility of things like income tax splitting and, having the ability to have more children because of a lower cost environment. That ties back to signing up to Kyoto, signing up to Paris. So that, the Liberal governments are not to be taken out of the frame for this as well. We're now addicted, I think, to the sort of the scheme which brings in more taxpayers, which pumps up the housing market, which provides grist for the mill in terms of business and cash flow. So, I mean, I think that's the number one starting point for all of this. And that, unfortunately, isn't a quick fix, but it's something that both sides of politics should have been dealing with for the last 25 or 30 years. We should be making it easier for Australians to grow their own families first.
And Alex, just quickly before we go, you had Joanna Howe, who we've often had here on the show. She's an amazing activist, if you like that word, for, I guess, protecting the rights of babies, anti-abortionist activist. She was there in the South Australian meeting that you had, Liberal Party meeting. It seemed to be quite controversial. Why are the Libs, or some Libs, so reluctant to discuss abortion? And I think Joanna Howe does a pretty amazing job. What was the controversy there?
Yeah, well, I mean, I agree with you. I think she's an extremely effective campaigner. It's a point I made on the night. Whether you agree with her position on everything or not, it doesn't matter. I mean, I think the politicians, particularly politicians from the right side of the spectrum in this country, could learn a lot from the effective nature in which she campaigns. She's extremely effective at getting her job done. She's moved the dial on her chosen issues. And it was a Liberal Women's Council meeting where apparently it would seem from the from the feedback that you actually have to be a woman to speak and address. Just like if you go and address the Real Estate Institute, you have to be a real estate guy, or a doctor's conference, you have to be a doctor. Makes no sense at all. But in any event, I mean, she's a very interesting person, and she's done a lot for women's rights and the rights of the unborn. And it was a fantastic speech. Really, there was nothing controversial at all. I've spent the last 2 weeks fielding media inquiries, with this sort of intrigue, all coinciding with me putting my hand up for the state presidency of the Liberal Party here. It's just been repeated attack after repeated attack, which provides me with nothing but mirth and humour and the ability to tell some of these outlets what I think of them.
And I hope it drives you forward to win, Alex. That's what it's all about at the end of the day. Thanks so much, Alex Antic, for coming on the show. And we'll speak again soon. After the break, Emissions Impossible with Professor Ian Plimer in a tick. Yes, it's time now for Emissions Impossible. Let's bring in our leading geologist and the Executive Director at Hancock Energy, Professor Ian Plimer. Great to have you back on the show, Ian. Now, you were straight on the phone to me at the end of last week's show, informing me that Rita and I had mixed up our spur minimums with our medieval warmings. It's one of those mistakes you make on live TV.
I reject that assertion. I was very specific
you pointed
about that
out
data.
that the frozen frost fairs on the Thames had been 200 years earlier than when I'd said they had been. And you even have paintings to show it, which we're going to put up on the screen. So please, there you go, Ian, explain the spur minimum and the little warming and the modern warming and the medieval warming to us, to explain to our audience.
Well, I am a pedant, and no one from the left would have picked this up because they've got no knowledge and it doesn't fit the mantle. So you're lucky that someone on side picked it up.
Exactly.
Now, since the time of Jesus, we've got very good record of humans and climate change. At the time of Jesus, it was warm, was very warm. And then we had a period of cooling, and that started the Dark Ages. And then we had a period of warming, and that was a medieval warming. Now, that started about 900 AD. We know it finished in 1304 AD when the Gulf of Bothnia froze, and we came into the Little Ice Age. And it became incredibly cold, with really cold periods in the Spera, which was between 1460 and 1350 AD. And then the next very cold period was a Maunder minimum. And this we know very well because we had astronomical observations saying that the sun wasn't very active. And for some strange reason, people came to the conclusion that maybe the sun drives climate. And the Maunder was between 1645 and 1715. And then we had the Dalton minimum, it warmed up. And then we had the Dalton minimum between 1790 and 1830. Not a good time to invade Russia when you've got an ultra cold period of time. Now, these are all driven by the sun. And so we see these warming and cooling periods, and we came out of that Little Ice Age in about 1850. So with the previous warmings, we've never had industry. We've never had industry putting out the gas of life, carbon dioxide, into the atmosphere. We've had something else driving the climate. So you have to ask the obvious question, well, of course, in the modern warming, is this driven by the gas of life, which has never in the past driven warmings, or is it driven by something else, such as the sun? So the evidence, I think, is absolutely unequivocal. The sun, which is coupled with our distance from the sun and various other galactic forces, are driving climate. And to use words like decarbonise, and I don't know what that means, or net zero, is just gobbledygook. So history gives us a story. You don't even have to be a scientist to understand that we've had cold and warm periods. These have had a profound effect on humans. We had a massive death rate in the Maunder. When it was warmer, we had an increase in the population. So we see exactly the opposite of the trauma that people are trying to paint from having a very slight warming or having something that we've called for 1,000 years. We've called it summer.
James and Rita.
Oh, and that is still true today, isn't it, Ian? There are far more deaths from cold temperature than there is from warm temperature. And that is just fact. That is not something that you could have an argument about. So you're saying climate change is real and warming is generally a positive thing, Professor?
I am indeed. There was a medical survey done some years ago of 34 million climate deaths, and more than 90% of those climate deaths were from cold times, not from warm times. We love the warmth. We actually have migrated into warm periods, warm areas. We have people coming from that miserable, cold, precipitous place called England, going to Spain to enjoy this warm weather. So we love the warmth and we thrive in the warmth. And migration has been very much driven by climate. It's been very much driven by people going to productive, warm climates.
James.
Professor, I'm still getting over this news that this giant hydrogen bomb explosion in the sky somehow has some effect on our weather. And it'll take me all day to process that, but thank you for helping us out with that. But in the meantime, Professor, just in more sort of contemporary news, Energy Minister Chris Bowen was at the press club this week, and he made a number of startling assertions about the reliability of coal, and he didn't mention the reliability of renewables, and claimed that things were just getting ever better with his renewable energy transition. I was just wondering if you had a chance to have a look at that speech and what you made of Bowen and his attempt to spruik this this renewable energy disaster.
Well, this man is a hypocrite. He's cost this country billions of dollars. He doesn't practice what he preaches, and he has absolutely no knowledge whatsoever about the past. And he should know that we've had warmer times in the past. We've had wetter times in the past. We've had droughts in the past. We've had very cold periods of time in the past. And I'm all for him putting out carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and jetting around the world, not at my cost, of course, but I'm all for him putting plant food into the atmosphere. We are now in a situation where we've had a decrease in carbon dioxide in the atmosphere over the last 500 million years. We are now at a dangerously low level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. That is unrelated to anything that we humans are doing. This is because we've been sucking up carbon dioxide, putting them into shells, putting them into corals, putting them into carbon-rich sediments. This has been happening for quite a long period of time. And we've been sucking this carbon dioxide out from the atmosphere. It was nearly 1%. It is now 0.04%. And for the last 50 million years, we've actually been cooling down. So we have to be very careful of the ideology that comes out of people like Bowen, who are pig ignorant and who wants to tax us to death on his ideology, yet he's got nothing to substantiate it.
Now, just quickly, Ian, you're a geologist. Chris Bowen referred to standing somewhere in Tuvalu. He suggested that nobody else had been there who was in the press club room. He claimed to have viewed from this rocky outcrop in Tuvalu evidence of rising sea levels. Do you think he was correct or not?
Wow.
Well, Charles Darwin wrote a book about coral reefs in 1842. He studied Tuvalu. As a result of that, Professor Sir Edgeworth David from Sydney University persuaded the New South Wales government to fund a drilling program on Tuvalu, and he showed that Tuvalu actually is on top of a volcano, which is sinking, which is inequivalent to sea level rise. Coral keeps growing. It loves the warm water. It loves the volcano sinking. The only evidence we've got in Tuvalu is that the coral keeps growing, and every time the water warms up or rises, the coral keeps growing. So he should have a knowledge of history. He should know what has happened in the past. It's all very nice to go to Tuvalu and complain about sea level change, but maybe some of these Pacific atoll islands have problems of sea level because they harvest a lot of the coral for building roads, for building airports, for making cement. Maybe that's the reason.
Brilliant. I've got to cut you off there because we've got to go to a break, but you're absolutely right there. I think you should take Chris Bowen out to the Tuvalu and stand on that rocky outcrop and the two of you discuss it together, because I think that's
I've got better
brilliant.
people to go to Tuvalu with.
Thanks so much, Professor Plimer, for joining us on the show. Going to take a short break. When I come back, I've got a few things to say about the ABC in a tick. Hello, you're watching Outsiders with Rita, Bananas in Pyjamas, Panahi, James, Four Corners, Morrow, and myself, Rowan, the Gruen transfer dean. I'm not going to beat about the bush here. The apology from the ABC's Managing Director Hugh Marks to Gina Reinhart about the ABC's disgusting, sadistic, pornographic so-called satire was completely unacceptable and wholly inadequate. Coming nearly a month after the initial depraved piece of hate-filled incitement to murder was originally broadcast with the full approval of the entire ABC apparatus, this was a Clayton's apology. The apology you put out when deep down you believe you have nothing to apologise for. This week, Hugh Marks cloaked his apology in classic ABC arrogance and smug self-justification, saying, quote, "While the ABC Ombudsman has found that the film did not breach the ABC's editorial policies, the ABC acknowledges the episode has fallen short of community expectations." He goes on, the ABC apologises to Mrs. Reinhart and to anyone else affected or upset by the publication of the film. End of quote. Fallen short of community expectations. Are you kidding me? What community would ever accept this vile ABC filth? Spain in the late 15th century, perhaps? The community of Mongol hordes, rapists and pillagers, perhaps? Without any serious or specific warning, the ABC ran a segment for the whole world to see on free-to-air television and kept it online for 25 days after the initial objections were raised, where they gave specific tutelage and instruction on how to first torture in the most explicit, graphic, degrading and disgusting manner, and then murder a prominent public figure with the clear insinuation that the motivation for this atrocity was political. Fallen short of community expectations. Who on earth was your target audience, Mr. Marks? Vlad the Impaler? Who were your producers, Mr. Marks? The Marquis de Sade? Thomas de Torquemada? Yesterday, the UK Telegraph reported that the British police are investigating possible links between the murder of Conservative-turned-Reform MP Anne Widdecombe's, between her recent murder and a mysterious firebombing last year of Nigel Farage's home. Anne Widdecombe was brutally bludgeoned to death in July with a hammer, allegedly by a far-left activist. 2 other British politicians have been murdered in recent years. It is in this toxic environment that the ABC chose to suggest murdering Gina Rinehart. Yesterday, Peter Jennings in The Australian wrote a terrifying piece, and we'll chat to him in a minute, about far-left terrorism in Australia. Marco Rubio has warned of the same in America, where far-left violence has seen numerous murders or attempted assassinations, including, allegedly, the death of Charlie Kirk. The horrific truth is that many on the left laughed at and applauded the disgusting skit advocating a similar politically motivated murder of Gina Rinehart. At huge cost, her security will, I imagine, need to be increased and extended. The cost for that must be borne, in my opinion, not by the ABC, because that is taxpayers' money, and it is not the taxpayer who did this atrocity, but by the individuals who sit on the board of the ABC, including Chairman Kim Williams and Deputy Chair Lisa Caffrey, and senior management at the ABC, including Hugh Marks. Personally, out of their pockets, they are responsible for creating the culture in which those politically motivated death threats were aired and publicised. They justified this disgusting and so-called satirical incitement to murder, and they permitted the death threat to remain online for nearly a month, by which time every murderous leftist ratbag and nutjob in the world could have seen it. They were more interested in protecting their taxpayer-funded sinecures, salaries, perks, than concerned for the security and safety of an Australian woman and mum. They must bear the cost of all necessary precautions to ensure Mrs. Rinehart's permanent safety and security, not to mention ample financial recompense for the humiliation, ridicule, terror and abuse that they inflicted on a private citizen at the hands of the public broadcaster. They have enjoyed the privilege and generous financial reward for running the public broadcaster, with combined salaries and perks of many, many millions of dollars. They must now pay, not the Australian taxpayer. Following Mr. Mark's Claytonish apology, Hancock Prospecting, Mrs. Rinehart's company, released a lengthy statement via a spokesperson, well worth reading, pointing out what a joke the ABC editorial standards are. Here's just a part of it. Quote, "The content shown on the ABC normalised violent torture against a woman till death and dehumanised an Australian such that she was worthless and okay to be sexually tortured. This should not be and must not be acceptable in our country. This concept that a woman can be regarded as worthless, even if she's contributed hugely to the country, so it's okay to sexually torture her to death, is not a new concept. It is practiced by terrorists and has been practiced elsewhere in the world and must never be regarded as art or acceptable in our country, even by the ABC. The ABC and now the ABC Ombudsman have both stated that this program met the ABC's editorial standards. Indeed, the Ombudsman bent over backwards to endorse the ABC's conduct and even misstated that the episode was not accompanied by any visual depictions of violence, which is not true because of the inclusion of the proposed weapon, sticks, while saying to use sticks to enter Mrs. Rinehart's body in such a way as to kill her, and the video shows a picture of Mrs. Rinehart's head on a stick. The internal ABC Ombudsman's decision that the ABC did not breach ABC editorial standards fails all Australian women and the millions of taxpayers who funded the ABC. That comment from Hancock continues. There remains ongoing silence from the ABC Chair Kim Williams, Deputy Chair Lisa Caffrey and the ABC Board, and we, that's Hancock, await a detailed account in relation to who approved this unacceptable piece to be aired and who approved the long delay in its removal, which must have been ticked off by those higher up in the ABC, given its high profile in the media and the many complaints. The buck stops with the heads of the ABC. End of quote. That entire quote was from a spokesperson for Hancock Prospecting, Mrs. Gina Rinehart's company. And this is the key point. From the silly, gormless girl who made the revolting film all the way through the supposedly reputable production company Endemol Shine, up through the labyrinthine echelons of Ultimo, right to the chairman of the ABC board and the ABC Ombudsman itself, every single individual and decision maker at the ABC is now so committed to demonising and dehumanising conservatives that they have become thoroughly desensitised to the harm and damage they are doing. Nobody batted an eyelid at this depravity. They all giggled and nodded and chuckled and chortled. Oh, no one objected. If ever there was proof that the ABC is no longer fit for purpose, no longer capable of sound judgment, no longer capable of withstanding the most extreme leftist propaganda and hate-mongering, this is it. There are no more excuses. There are no more justifications and turning a blind eye. The ABC is poisoning young minds at schools and at universities. It is polluting the public square with its rancid output. The ABC has become a dangerous and divisive force that damages social cohesion in Australia by pumping out hardcore leftist sludge and propaganda day and night, including promoting and approving of the incitement to murder and torture political opponents in the name of entertainment. And here's the thing. Yesterday, I watched the new edited version of the original sketch on the ABC website. Now, normally, if a piece of film has had a critical element removed, even with the best editing, you can sense something isn't quite right, it doesn't flow or quite make sense. Well, along with the vile pornographic stuff, they've now removed all the content referencing Gina Rinehart, including the comments and warning from the judges. And guess what? It works perfectly. There is no sense that anything at all is missing from the original sketch. In fact, it flows even better than the original did, proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that the inclusion of the Rinehart sodomy material was 100% gratuitous. And that puts the ABC unambiguously in breach of the Broadcasting Code, in my opinion, which means ACMA must now investigate and determine the appropriate regulatory action to be taken against the ABC and against the individuals responsible for that breach. This organisation, this ABC, is rotten to the core, in my opinion, putrid to the marrow. It is beyond salvation. It must be abolished. And if the individuals it employs are so sure of their own talents, so sure of their own progressive sophistication and their moral superiority, they will have no problem setting up a subscription model for themselves, where their vile left-wing prejudices and hatreds, their pornographic and sadistic satire, their hatred of mainstream Australian values can compete for viewers' eyeballs like the rest of us have to, based on talent and merit alone. Sadly, there are enough sickos and weirdos out there that they might even make a buck or two. But you and I should not have to pay a brass razoo for such a depraved and monstrous organisation. It's time to terminate the ABC. Well, I mentioned in my editorial there, the brilliant but frightening piece in The Australian by Peter Jennings, which looks into far-left extremism in this country, and it's well worth a read. He is also News24's defence analyst, and I'm pleased to say that Peter joins us now. Peter, great to see you as always. Thank you for coming on the show. That was a terrific piece and a terrifying piece, as I said, that you wrote in the Oz there. Warning against left-wing terrorism, far-left terrorism. Marco Rubio's warned against it in the States. You're warning against it now in Australia. Tell our viewers why.
Well, the significant thing, Rowan, is that the Victorian police are now considering a case as an act of far-left terrorism, which was an attack on an Australian defence supplier in Victoria back in 2025. And a video posted online of a guy in a balaclava spouting a lot of sort of extremist left propaganda about how the colonies must fall and defence companies that support Israel in particular would be targeted. And then 3 cars were, I think I'm supposed to say, allegedly torched. Now, the interesting thing about that is if this is now proven as an act of terrorism, that carries potentially life sentences for the individuals involved, rather than much lower criminal offences of arson. And according to Mike Burgess, the head of ASIO, there's a significant number of similar type attacks which have taken place against Jewish organisations and defence companies in particular. So, you know, far-left terrorism has been something that has been an offence which people don't speak of. There's an obsession with the so-called right, which actually likes to parade up and down in their ridiculous little black shorts, but don't appear to actually do much in the way of violence. But I think this is now a sort of a breakthrough in terms of how police are thinking about this, and it could potentially lead to, you know, further prosecutions under that particular crime.
James.
Well, Peter, you know, if you look at the history of the last 50, 100 years, left-wing terrorism has been a huge thing, whether it's in the U.S. in the 70s, the Baader-Meinhof gang, you know, more recent attacks in the United States that are allegedly motivated by far-left extremism. But you mentioned in your piece a really great book by someone called Adam Kirsch called On Settler Colonialism, and it's a fantastic read. But are you worried that the rhetoric that we are now hearing around delegitimizing Australia, that we are an illegitimate settler colonial state, to use the language of the left, is going to create, I guess, a permission structure for more people on the left with violence in their hearts to go down this road?
Yes, I think it has. And, you know, I'm of a generation where this wasn't being taught in universities when I was studying history, James, but unfortunately it has been for 20 or so years now, with a number of Australian academics in the international lead arguing this case for settler colonialism, and how what that means is that our country, the Canadians, the Americans, and bizarrely enough the Israelis, are all described as colonial societies that have to be sort of broken up. This is very much at the core of the left element of the international protest movement, which took up after the Hamas attack on Israel back in 2023. And, you know, the one thing that unites far-left extremist groups and jihadist extremism is anti-Semitism. Which was the thing that kind of brought these two groups together on our city streets, particularly in Sydney and Melbourne, over the last few years. So it has an Australian origin, as it were, or at least a Western democratic origin. We've tolerated this protest movement too far. And there's a spectrum of ideology here. So there may be people who take it up as a sort of an intellectual thought exercise, but there are a small number of people who are prepared to actually commit acts of violence in support of these ideological ideas. And I think we've been way too tolerant of allowing this to bubble up through our university system, and to be something that seemed to be acceptable to bring protesters out into the streets. So we have to rethink this. I think we have to rethink how people are being taught. what people are being taught. And we have to sort of walk away from the idea that somehow this is a clever intellectual idea that should be tolerated, because the extreme end of it is one which could end in violence and terrorism.
Rita.
Another thing the Islamists and neo-Marxist, hard left extremists, whatever you want to call them, have in common is a shared hatred of the West. And we see that in so much of their activism. Are you worried that these ideas have been normalised? It's almost fashionable to hold those views these days, that we are on stolen land, this was, always will be Aboriginal land, those sorts of sentiments that are at their heart anti-West.
Very much so, Rita, and you see it in things like protests pulling down statues, often accompanied with Hamas symbols and phrases like "the colony must burn" or "the colony must fall." This has been sort of treated as the intellectual stock in trade of our universities for way too long. And so another point to sort of bring out here is that in a few days' time, there's supposed to be a school student strike, which is going to see students come out from schools marching in the streets, sponsored by a number of these far-left groups that actually are encouraging them to do so. And I think that this is sort of tolerated as a bit of a frolic, and it's fun for kids to wag off school for a day. But in fact, what we're seeing here is a recruitment exercise on the part of a number of extreme left socialist groups that are getting into our schools, and already can point to a number of, teacher organisations which support this ideology. So some fundamental questions should be asked, Rita, about, what is it that our kids are being taught? What are they reading or not reading? Why should we indulge this when so much of it is directed towards attacking the foundations of our own society, which somehow is now seen to be cool? I think it's very disturbing. And to sort of bring this back to the start of the conversation, therefore, I think it's a good thing that the police are investigating in Victoria a potential case of far-left extremism leading to a terrorist act, because this is a spectrum. It begins with radicalisation of youngsters and it can end in very dark and dangerous places.
Peter Jennings, always great to chat to you. Terrific article there, and thanks so much for coming on and talking to us about it. And we hope to speak to you again soon. Thank you very much. Peter Jennings there. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, James's Truth Bomb in a tick.
Hello, you're watching Outsiders with your hosts, Rita Panahi, Rowan Dean, and myself, James Morrow. And if you're like me, you're probably old enough to remember a time when the radical far left managed to hide their contempt for the societies that they were trying to overthrow. Well, guess what? No longer. Now, by now you've heard me and probably some other commentators reporting on the rise of this new movement on the left in the United States called the Democrat Socialists of America. It's a faction of the left that is currently enjoying its moment in the sun, and which has establishment Democrats panicking today in much the same way the MAGA movement made the old blue blazer Mitt Romney establishment Republicans cower in fear as their old business model of losing politely while collecting in millions of dollars in donations evaporated. Now, of course, there is one big difference, though, between MAGA on the right and today's DSA on the left. MAGA, Make America Great Again, actually was and is about loving America, even an idealized version of it, and returning the country to its former glory. But this new left, well, they seem to absolutely hate tradition, fun, Western civilization, white people, holidays including Christmas, and basically the entire US of A. Now, stick with me here because I'm going to save the best, or rather the worst, for last, but let me give you an example of what's going on here. Now, you may have heard that in the U.S. state of Michigan this past week, a guy named Abdul Rahman El Sayed won the primary that's like a popular pre-selection, giving him the chance to run for the Senate on the Democrat ticket in November. Well, here he is caught on a hot mic back in 2020 talking about one of the most scenic and historic places in the state of Michigan, the small resort community of Mackinac Island. It is a historic, all-American town. Look at that, where the flag flies high and proudly, and the skies light up every year for the 4th of July. Honestly, how could you hate that? But what does our friend Abdul Rahman El Sayed think about all-American Mackinac?
I hate Mackinac so much. It's funny because, like, if we win, this is going to be the, like, summer home. I'm just gonna be like, every time I've ever come here, I've hated it. Why am I here?
Well, the feeling was mutual. Mackinac, to be fair, wasn't exactly home to his biggest support base in the primary. For that, you'd have to go to the heavily Muslim town of Dearborn, Michigan. Here you can see the local residents celebrating the Islamic festival of Arabaeen, which marks 40 days after Ashura, the day that Imam Hussein ibn Ali, grandson of the Prophet Muhammad, was killed in the Battle of Karbala in 680 AD. And where the local Shiite Imam recently gave a ringing endorsement to El Sayed.
آن الأوان بإذن الله تعالى أن تصل أصواتنا وأن يصل إلى واشنطن من يمثلنا ويخسأ الخاسئون الصهاينة الذين بذلوا ملايين الدولارات لأجل أن يوقفوا هذا المد ويأبى الله إلا أن يتم نوره ولو كره المشركون ولو كره الكافرون.
Ah, yes, the Zionist lowlives. Well, anyway, diversity is our strength, right? But he's not the only one who's exhibiting this trend of anti-Americanism. In the nearby state of Wisconsin, Francesca Hong is running for governor, again for the Democrats, and again from the far left wing of the party. And it has come to light that she, guess what, hates Thanksgiving, having posted about this fantastic American holiday back in 2020 that we should stop celebrating colonialism and the original super spreader event that killed indigenous folks, spelled F-O-L-X for some reason, and women. Now, she seems nice, but guess what? It's not just Thanksgiving. She's also not a fan of Christmas. A snow and Christmas tree screensaver on her computer once made her feel slightly attacked. And on the 4th of July, in the middle of the Biden administration, so it wasn't even like Trump world, she said, "While we are not enslaved, it is worth it for those of us seeking our liberties, freedom, and human rights exponentially stripped away to ask what is the 4th of July to us." Oh, and guess what? She even hates Valentine's Day, saying that the worst of humanity comes out from folks celebrating another day. Capitalism tells you how to love. Seriously? Valentine's Day brings out the worst in humanity? Valentine's Day? She's even tweeted about how old white people give her anxiety. The funny thing is that Hong used to own a restaurant that, guess what, went out of business. That's capitalism for you. But I don't know. If maybe you hate your customers in a very white state like Michigan and don't particularly like big hospitality earners like Valentine's Day, well, I don't know. Are you surprised her restaurant closed? Anyway, she's walked all this back, of course, more or less, but I don't buy it. Because like so many of her ilk, she clearly simply cannot stand anything that feels like it is representative of the old order of America, the order she and so many other Democrat socialists wish to destroy. And of course, they've got their equivalents here. And destroy they do, often violently. Remember, one of the greatest cheerleaders of this movement is the influencer, I hate that word, Hassan Piker. He's the guy who led that mission to Cuba and once said that America deserved 9/11 and a whole lot of other really awful things. Well, he's back, and again in a resurfaced clip that, even if it is a bit of hyperbole, is pretty awful and also really revealing.
We're going to keep bringing in immigrants in this country on purpose, just so they can your sister, and then maybe even your daughter. We're going to destroy the white race. That's what we're here to do.
The crazy thing that not even in the fever dreams of your most ardent anti-immigration nationalist would you come up with someone like Piker saying something so directly. But this is the guy who is also a massive backer of this entire movement. People who seem to have issues with, as I say, white people, America, traditional holidays, the whole box and dice. I've said it before and I'll say it again. When people tell you who they are, believe them.
Great stuff. Thanks, James. Now, I was fascinated by this story that came out during the week. We heard for so long all about supposed starvation and malnutrition in Gaza. This left-wing propaganda story from Hamas went on and on. You'd hear it endlessly on the ABC. You'd hear it everywhere else. And, of course, it's now been completely debunked by the United Nations themselves. A newly released United Nations nutrition survey of Gaza's children completely shatters that narrative. And it shows, in fact, that the kids are less healthier than pretty much any other kids anywhere else in the Middle East. And they're certainly healthier than they were before the war. And this is, it shows that they're on the malnutrition scale, etc., their health, their height, their well-being, etc., is actually way better. They're right at the top of the league in the Middle East. It's extraordinary.
I don't know, Rowan. This is a lot for me to process. I mean, first we had Professor Ian Plimer telling us that the sun, that big, giant hydrogen explosion in the sky, could be causing things to get hotter or cooler. I don't know. And now we have news that maybe the Gaza Health Ministry isn't reliable. It's a lot to take on.
It's a lot happening in the world,
honestly, seriously.
But it is such a joke. I mean, all the time, the big narrative was, you know, you're baby killers, you're this, you're that. You've got to feel sorry for Jewish Australians who've had to put up with this garbage being spewed at them from all the radical activists, all the rest of them, and it turns out to be nonsense, Rita.
Well, we're not surprised by the UN being fooled, or because they want to be fooled. It's an ideological body. We've stopped really debating the whole notion of why we continue to fund the UN. Is it actually doing what we was intended to do when we first decided this was a good idea? And we've just kind of gone along with it. And Australia's voting record at the UN is very interesting of late, particularly when you look at the positions it's taken when it comes to Israel. It's almost always been in support, and now it's increasingly abstaining from important votes, and that's being noticed around the world.
Yeah, it's interesting.
But, you know, it is, too, that you talk about those international institutions. You know, one of the things we spoke about with Alex Antich before was this whole, you know, refugee convention and all of these other international treaties that we are signatories to, and they are exactly how countries like us get abused. And we have wound up making a fetish out of documents like these UN treaties and so on, and said, oh, well, we can never get out of them because we signed them once, even though, you know, the reason why we have a refugee convention, it was to deal with the consequences of a massive European war. You know, that's not what we're dealing with today. we're dealing with an entirely different situation. That's why there are so many people, and you know, you go through the caseload of the Administrative Review Tribunal and these other bodies that look at these in the courts, and so many people who come in and say, oh, well, I've been here as a student, I don't want to go back, so I'm going to make up a story and say, in my home village back in my old country, I'm now gay, and they're going to kill me if I go home. And then this literally happens all the time. And because of the Refugee Convention, you can't say, mate, on your bike, you're trying it on.
Well, you're right, Rita. We've got to start pulling out of these institutions that don't work for us. I mean, if you remember, and again, I'd say the ABC is one of those institutions. If you remember, only whenever it was last year, when you had that vile photograph of a woman like a Madonna holding a supposed starving child in Gaza. You could see the bones on the kid, and it was the ABC and the mainstream media pumped this photo, or you couldn't escape this photo. It was on every news show. This is how evil the Israeli Defense Force are. Look what's happened. Turns out that the kid had a malnutrition problem, health problems going back long, nothing to do with the war or Israel, anything. The photo had been staged. It was Hamas propaganda. Around the world, well-meaning people were fooled. If you bothered to look for 2 seconds, you can figure out that it was so obviously staged. But anyway, people are fooled. And yet this week, when UNICEF itself comes out, and because it's always, oh, it's the United Nations, we've got to do this. When UNICEF itself comes out and says, no, the malnutrition is wrong, it didn't happen, the starvation didn't happen, nothing. Will you see that all over the ABC? Will you see it all over the Guardian? No, it's not mentioned. It's quietly tucked away. And this is the perversity of the mainstream media, but particularly the ABC, whose charter demands that it tell all sides of the story, and it never does.
Yes, that's
anyway,
right.
There we go. That's another institution to pull out of, but there are so many of them. World Health Organization, again, another institution that is not doing us any favours. Human rights as well.
And we've seen with the Trump administration really tackling USAID, moving the projects that actually have some merit, I think, to the State Department, but all the activist bodies, all the fraud, all those unaccountable bodies pushing essentially left-wing propaganda, that has had such an enormous impact, really, all around the world, and you can see it. Things that you thought were some organic movement, they're not there anymore because the US taxpayer isn't funding it anymore.
The USAID was far worse than all of that. It was actually actively destabilizing governments, allies, around particularly Latin America. It is no coincidence when you look at DSA's activities that suddenly in the couple of years since it has been shut down, suddenly conservative governments are winning in Latin America. Now, the conjecture is that an awful lot of USAID funds were actually getting funneled into left-wing political organizations to fund them to stop conservative right-wing governments. So you've got Bukele in El Salvador, you've got Colombia just elected one.
Chile.
Chile, Milei in Argentina. You see suddenly all of these things are changing here, particularly after USAID. And, of course, the big one's going to be Cuba when that goes.
Yeah, when will it go? Come on, Marco.
Not soon enough. Come on, Marco. I know you got a lot of jobs to do. But...
Richard Kemp put out a tweet about the UNICEF starvation story. Here it is. We'll put it up on the screen. Too small for me to read. But there you go. He was pointing out that, yes, that Palestinians need to rework their narrative, and I'm sure they will. But also,
the next thing's going to happen. I bet they're going to start demanding. Hey, come on! Why aren't we getting free Ozempic for the Gazans? That's where it's going to wind up.
Well, all the free Ozempic's going to Victoria's prison system because apparently we've got prisoners who are getting taxpayer-funded Ozempic.
What are we feeding them? What are we feeding them? Prison food's not supposed to be.
Well, it seems to be in Victoria. I mean, really. If you want to see the extent of the craziness, I keep telling you. Victoria is a warning to the rest of the country. It starts there, it doesn't end there.
Yeah.
Victoria is Australia's California. It is absolutely Australia's California. It is don't Victorianize my Australia. People say in America, don't California my USA. It is the exact same sort of mismanagement, left-wing lunacy. Yeah,
absolutely.
And a once rich and great state.
Well, it's interesting because there was some polling that just came out over the weekend showing the new Labor leader, the new Premier, Ben Carroll, well in front as preferred Premier.
This staggers me. This staggers me every single Victorian election. I just go, I don't understand.
Well, I kind of do understand it because when the opposition's not great, that's, I think, the key part of it. It's not that Victorians
but what have they got, Stockholm syndrome or something? The Victorians want more of what they've had?
The coalition, the latest polling, they're still in front, two-party preferred, but they need to come to terms with the One Nation phenomenon because I think they're still in denial about the fact that One Nation's no longer polling 5-6%. It is polling over 20%, including in Victoria, primary vote, and you need to come to a working arrangement with them. This denial of we will never deal with One Nation is just self-defeating. That's going to guarantee another term for Labor.
The mind boggles at what another term of Labor in Victoria would do, seriously. But you're right, and this election in Victoria is going to be so crucial to see where the cards fall in terms of preference systems and all that sort of stuff, and that will be determining the federal election.
Well, and if the Liberals don't organise this now in Victoria, Victoria is the test case for all of this. This is the absolute test case. This is where they need to work that. They don't have to say, we're going to share executive government. They do absolutely have to say there's a preference deal here, because otherwise, I'll tell you what's going to happen. In regional Victoria, the coalition is going to cease to exist. This is an existential moment for them. I don't think they see what's coming at them.
They don't. And this is the thing. Victoria isn't some bizarro parallel universe. Victorians aren't crazy. We saw with The Voice, despite the fact that no camps barely spent a cent in Victoria. They kind of wrote Victoria off. Majority of Victorians still said no. So the population, I say, is still basically sound. We just don't have great options.
There you go. Going to take a short break. After that, we'll come back with Wally of the Week. Tick. You're watching Outsiders, and thank you so much for watching us every Sunday morning. We certainly do appreciate your company, and we're glad to be with you. Now, to show some Wallies of the Week. Now, I want to bring together a couple of themes we've been talking about, what we were just talking about with Victoria, and the uphill battle the Liberal Party seems to be facing there, if the current polls are to go by. She was interviewed by Patricia Karvelas on the ABC, who I might have mentioned earlier in the show. Have a listen to this bizarre and weird exchange, particularly, and this is why she's my nomination for Wally of the Week, Patricia Karvelas. She doesn't understand what a globalist is. She thinks a globalist is some weird conspiracy. We were just talking about things like the United Nations, a globalist organisation, the Paris Agreement, a globalist organisation, the World Health Organization. A globalist is someone who puts the interests of a global authority over that of the localised democratic body. It's not a hard concept, but it's one that the ABC's supposed senior political correspondent, A, doesn't understand, and B, demonises people who do understand it. Have a listen.
He believes in foreign globalists. Could you see yourself sitting around the cabinet table with a guy who thinks that?
Well, I'm running for majority government for that very reason, because I have a plan and I have the solutions to fix this state.
You say for that very reason. It must alarm you.
I'm running for majority government.
Come on, does that alarm you? Globalists.
I'm running for majority government because I believe that my team has the plan to fix Victoria.
So why is Patricia Karvelas demonising the head of One Nation, who has talked about the globalist organisations? Why does she not even comprehend what he's talking about and then try and use it as a smear word?
Why are you nominating Patricia Karvelas instead of Jess Wilson, the leader of the Victorian Liberals, who also doesn't seem to understand what it is and seems to think it's something scary? Her answer, I thought, was far more bizarre than the question. I think the question was fine. It was an opportunity for a leader of a supposedly centre-right party to put the ABC in their place and say precisely what you said. A globalist is simply somebody who prioritises, say, the UN over the interest of Victorian citizens. And then she could state, whether that's distasteful to her or not. But I thought her answer was even more bizarre than the question.
We've got a joint Wally then, or maybe she could steal the crown from Patricia Karvelas and take the medal home herself. Jess, OK, we'll go next.
Yeah, no, I think Jess, I'm with you on that one. Sorry. Look, we got to talk about Jason Arday. He is the Cambridge professor who resigned this week after, see him there on the screen, after, let's just say that there were some inaccuracies, questions raised about some of his scholarship and some of his life work. Now, I think, though, the real Wally has to be Cambridge University, which hired him, the book publishers, who are apparently still running to publish his memoirs this week, in which he details all sorts of things like, having run a marathon every day for months, having done all sorts of crazy things, having been in a coma that nobody asked about, all these sort of, having to learn to speak again, all these sorts of crazy things in his life. And all of this stuff was completely believed and eaten up by these lefty idiots at the publisher and at Cambridge who all, they see, oh, here's a black guy who's calling himself a professor. Hey, sign him up. Tick, 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 DEI boxes. And he's allowed to say anything he wants, and nobody
But
it
gets worse.
It's his
Rita.
truth.
It's his truth.
It gets worse because what has happened is since then, so apparently some of his students were marked down because they complained that and if I watched one of the episode 40-minute one of his lectures, and they're complete drivel. They're just woke garbage drivel. They're meaningless. Some of the students complained and said, this professor is useless. He then found out, apparently, allegedly, and marked them down for racism. So now they're suing Cambridge for their bad results. So the whole thing is DEI, diversity and inclusion, always
Can I give you another example of that in the US? University of California, which decided, these SAT scores, they're all very,
That's right.
they're not very inclusive. They're probably propping up white supremacy and all sorts of other problematic things. And they just let in people, I don't know, based on feelings. And suddenly they're realising, our student population are pretty much illiterate, so we better go back to actually having some entrance requirements. So this is just hilarious, but academia is where these crazy ideas begin, but sadly these days they don't stop at academia, they go into the private sector, and that's why you've got people with pronouns in their email bios.
Have you got a Wally for us?
I do have a Wally. I am going to go with an LGBT teacher who says the quiet bit out loud, basically says they're intentionally targeting kids, young kids, to become, I don't know, the activists of the future.
The critical time to be there is grades 5 through 8 because you want to catch kids when they're starting puberty, because that's the time in which identity formation is central to their lives.
Get them young.
Get them young. I mean, we were told that never happens. There would be no teachers who are actively trying to indoctrinate children. But and we see it, thankfully, because they share it themselves on TikTok and other social media platforms, we see just videos every single week from around the US, the UK, sometimes right here in Australia, of teachers who feel like it's their duty, because they don't see it as indoctrination, James. They see it as social justice.
No. They see this as their job. They don't care about performing, literate students who can do long division or whatever the things that they're supposed to do. It is actually literally about remaking society. And the great thing is here, as you say, they do this stuff. They put it on TikTok. They have these Zoom calls. Somebody hits record. And it's like Zoom and TikTok have been for the teachers' unions what I think police body cams have been for, these movements that say the police are all racist and they just randomly shoot black people. Well, the cameras tell a different story. And, I think parents, this goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the show.
Right.
Parents need to speak up. And if they see all of this stuff in the classrooms, and if their kids, I have a friend, his kid comes home from preschool, Melbourne, obviously, but, but they're talking about, but the kid comes home 4 years old and is like, literally said to my friends who are the parents, the white people were very mean to the Aboriginals and stole all their land.
Wow.
At 4.
And at the end of
it's literally in childcare. I've got friends whose babies, 6 months on, they've got these activities that are all centred around this notion that we're on stolen land, that there's something objectively wrong with Australia. And you have to... it's a big move to move your child from a school, but it's not a big move to send an email to the principal and say, this is not what you should be doing.
Exactly. And
just very quickly, this is why the Albanese government is so determined to shove kids into preschools, daycares that all teach this, and they don't want you. They want you in the workforce so they can get your kids.
Okay, and just very quickly, at the end of that clip, that same woman went on to boast that they never used to have any LGBTQI kids, or maybe 1 or 2 in year 5 and 6. Now they've got 7 or 8 of them.
Wow.
What a surprise.
Anyway,
we've got to vote for our Wally. I think we agreed it's got to be Jess Wilson.
She wasn't even a nominee and she won.
But she won it. I mean, that's a
amazing.
sterling performance.
That's
Came out
amazing.
of nowhere. Going to take a short break. Then we'll get into I'm a Celebrity Stupid in a tick. Yes, wonderful, wacky world of celebrities. Rita, our old mate Bob Vylan, back again.
Yes, he's the singer who you might remember was chanting death to the IDF. Well, he thought he'd try a stage dive because, yeah, the adoring fans would hold him up and he would surf across the sea of humanity. Didn't work out that way. Yeah, but that was hilarious. What can you say?
It's like one of those trust exercises that goes wrong. You know, bonk.
Next time you see him, he's got the broken nose, the iPad, walking with it.
Oh, that's hilarious.
That is too funny.
fun.
I mean, God. So there are so many of these. Bob Vylan, that kneecap, that vile Irish group.
Oh, Greta was in the audience to watch
Greta
that.
there. They're
Yeah.
all these pro-Palestinian. I mean, to be, so cool to be pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel. Annie Lennox, who hasn't had a hit in God knows how long, from the Eurythmics.
Oh.
And great talent, but she's, from the 80s, James. She's come out and said, oh, I won't play in Israel. Well, probably most people in Israel don't remember the Eurythmics, but anyway. But Boy George, who did the brilliant single we played last week and who's actually brave enough to take a pro-Israel stance against all the kind of tsunami of hatred from the normal rock and roll hierarchy, he's come out and said, listen, Annie Lennox, instead of, why don't you actually go and play in Palestine somewhere and see how that goes for you?
I like more the line he had, I wonder if all this is about her bitter divorce with a Jewish guy. And I wasn't aware of that. I was like, oh, that's very interesting. Gives some new insight into the entire bit of activism.
Also, I just love the idea that the Israelis were clamouring for Annie Lennox to come play. I mean, I just don't imagine that, on the streets of Tel Aviv and Jerusalem.
Now, the woman can sing.
She can sing. Got a great voice. Why was a great
voice.
song. Why, oh, why. James.
Oh, yeah, well, this is just a bit of fun here. There's a comedian named Matt Ford in the United Kingdom, and we know that we've got this new sort of goofball Andy Burnham Prime Minister. He just does a very spot-on Andy Burnham. I just thought we should have a look.
Charlie, it's great to talk to you this morning. And, I was at the Everton game last night and, I had a few sherbets to the lads and, I might have had a kebab, feeling it this morning. But no, in all seriousness, if the Iranians carry on, I will use nuclear force.
Oh, it was the nuclear force at the end that did it for me.
Yeah.
Brilliant. That was very good. We've got some good options this week for our celebrities.
Do we give a vote? Do we get a vote? I think we've got to give the
Bob Vylan.
Bob Vylan, I mean.
Bob
Classic, great
doing
comedy.
his impersonation of a gay person in Gaza when Hamas gets him and takes him up to the roof, Yeah.
That's fantastic. Well, that's it from Outsiders for this week. Thank you so much for watching us. Don't forget, during the week, you've got Rita Panahi at 11 o'clock every evening. Brilliant, never miss it. And, of course, Friday's the big night. Go out Thursday, go out Saturday, but Friday you're in watching The World According to Rowan Daniel. You're watching The US Report. You're watching Lefty's Lunette. Friday night, just like Sunday morning. We'll see you next Sunday morning. Thanks so much. Bye.